You know that the government can spy on each one of us, but now Big Brother has another tool to get into your personal information. It's called Obamacare. Here's Wendy.
Yeah, the new health care law has a system set up that includes private data, and some are worried about its security. John Jessup has that story from Washington.
The conservative Tea Party fight to defund Obamacare has forced a government shutdown, but it hasn't stopped the next phase of the health care law. It also won't stop what some call a potential threat to your privacy.
I think there's a lot of concern around how the government just generally safeguards information.
For Obamacare to work, the government set up the Federal Data Services Hub, designed to help see if people who enroll in Obamacare qualify for extra government payments. It will pool people's personal info from the IRS, Social Security Administration, and other agencies, storing data about Americans' income, employment, and tax returns, and has been described as the largest consolidation of personal information in history.
I also want to assure you and all Americans that when they fill out their marketplace applications, they can trust that the information they're providing is protected through the highest privacy standards, and the technology underlying this application process has been tested and is secure.
But that pledge has been called into question. A Health and Human Services audit reported the administration can't verify whether the system can protect that information from computer hackers or cyber attacks, not to mention the delays, missed deadlines, and several reported glitches. What's more, the system can also include even more personal information that people provide when they sign up for plans, like how big their family is or how old family members are. Scott Gottlieb, a physician and former official with the Food and Drug Administration, worries that information could get into the wrong hands. In August, the Obama administration denounced federal and state partners who will help people apply for their insurance plans under the Affordable Care Act. They're called navigators, and their personal assistance comes with a hefty price tag. $67 million awarded in grant money. With so much access to personal information, Gottlieb believes the navigators pose an even bigger problem of potential fraud and abuse.
There's not a lot of requirements for background checks or minimum standards on education and training. In fact, they've actually they're past their deadline for the training that they were promised they were going to do.
Critics of Obamacare have described the program as a healthcare law's version of the National Security Agency. Given the steady drip of security problems by former NSA employee Edward Snowden, it makes Gottlieb nervous.
It doesn't inspire a lot of confidence that the hub, the portal, won't be accessible to a lot of people within these federal agencies. And the fact that the administration is now taking steps to exempt itself from statute, from law, like the Privacy Act, just means there's going to be even fewer safeguards.
It used to be in our nation that people lived their lives, their private lives, behind closed doors. It isn't that way anymore. Wendy, does that worry you?
Really, you can Google anyone and get all kinds of information on just about anybody. But you know, isn't it already out there? Doesn't everybody already have this information? Is this really, Obamacare really going to make it that much difference?
Does everybody have all that information about how many children you have, what kind of habits you have, what you buy, what you read? You know, that little machine, you can punch on all these little buttons, but apparently it's a personal permanent record. And they bring it out in court of everything that you've watched, looked at, what kind of movies you look at, what kind of DVDs you buy.
It is disturbing, but at the same time, you think, what can we do? You know, it seems like they know everything anyway.
Well, you hate to see it, but somebody ought to fight this, because Big Brother's right around the corner, and once he's got you, I don't like it.
Yeah, I don't like it either.
I'm a much more private person. You know, I'm on television, big deal. But you know, seriously, Google though, they have these teams that go around. And I have a place up in the mountains, I mean remote mountains. You can go on that Google thing and you can get a map and you can go from the airport and you can follow a little country road and then you can go up the driveway and here's my house and all the buildings. It's all there right before me.
Wow.
It's unbelievable.
Nothing's private anymore.
No, it isn't. So you live in the mountains, you can't get away. You think you're getting away, you can't do it. All right. Well, let's go to John in our Washington for more of today's top stories. Here's John.
Pat, both Republicans and Democrats are holding fast to their hard lines on the standoff over the government shutdown and the debt ceiling. But there may be a slight hint of some progress. Charlene Israel has the story.
In Washington, the blame game continues to take the place of negotiations. President Obama putting pressure on House Speaker John Boehner to hold a vote on a clean budget bill.
The reason that Speaker Boehner hasn't called a vote on it is because he doesn't apparently want to see the government shutdown end at the moment.
The speaker saying a bill will not pass unless Republicans get some changes to Obamacare or some cuts in America's deficit spending. Taking the floor Monday, Boehner called out President Obama for refusing to even discuss the options.
This morning, a senior White House official said that the president would rather default than to sit down and negotiate. Really?
On October 17th, the U.S. is projected to default on its loans unless Congress votes to allow the country to borrow more money. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid says Democrats will not negotiate over the debt ceiling. But the White House National Economic Council director says Democrats would consider a measure to increase the debt ceiling on a short-term basis. Meanwhile, concern on Wall Street is growing.
A 1 or 2 week shutdown, is probably manageable, not too big a hit to growth. Start getting into 2-3 weeks and longer, and the impact is significant.
The international community is concerned as well. On Monday, China's vice finance minister stressed the importance of raising the U.S. debt limit, saying, quote, safeguarding the debt is of vital importance to the economy of the U.S. and the world. China holds more than $1.2 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds, second only to Japan. Charlene Israel, CBN News.
Pat, what's your prediction here? What do you think it'll take to end this standoff?
Probably replacing the president with somebody else, but I don't think that's going to happen. What's happened, John, as I understand it now, is that the president says, I'm out of it. I think it's the negotiations are over his head, and so he's appointed Harry Reid to represent him from what I'm reading now, and that so the Senate. But the thing that, folks, we've got to remember that we have a Constitution. The first article of the Constitution speaks of the Congress, and the House of Representatives, called the People's House. This is the major body in the Constitution of the United States. The taxing measures come out of that, the revenue measures come out of that, and the House is supposed to be really important. The Senate, in the early days, the senators were elected by the legislatures in various states. We didn't have direct election of senators, and the Senate was not nearly as powerful. Now, Harry Reid wants to assert the Senate as the major body. It's not. The House of Representatives is the major body under the Constitution. But the president wants to act like it doesn't matter, and the Senate is trying to act, Schumer and others are trying to act like these people in the House of Representatives don't count. Well, they do count, and the institution is important from a constitutional perspective that the integrity of the House of Representatives be maintained. And so just keep that in mind when you hear all this stuff going around. But the president, all he has to do is sit down and say, look, I know we're spending too much money. We can't continue to run $1 trillion a year deficit. We can't do that. And so something has to be done to curtail the growth of spending. And that's all the Republicans are asking for. It's the intelligent way. We raise the debt ceiling. That just means you can go out and spend more. So you've maxed out your credit card, and you're screaming and yelling because you can't have more credit. A private citizen, you can't do it, but the Democrats want more credit. They want to be able to go out and borrow more money and spend more money. Well, I think I hate to see what's happening, but we have a society where people don't want to give up any of their perks and prerogatives. And we need to think about the good of our country and the good of the future, and the fact that the United States dollar is the reserve currency of the world. Very important. John.
The United States may face retaliation for the commando raid that captured a senior al-Qaeda suspect in Libya. U.S. Special Forces seized Abu Anas al-Libi over the weekend. He was wanted for more than a decade after the bombings of U.S. embassies in Africa in 1998. One prominent Muslim cleric warned, quote, "All options are on the table." He says some Libyans who think death is a way to get close to God may strike back. And one former member of an Islamic group, Ansar al-Sharia, says counterattacks, including kidnappings, are unavoidable. Nearly 1 in 10 young people in America say they've committed some form of sexual violence, from forcing another person to kiss them to touching someone sexually, all the way to sex itself. Those are the results from a study of more than 1,000 teens published in the Journal of the American Medical Association Pediatrics. Almost none of the incidents were ever reported. The study also found nearly half of the perpetrators blamed the victim, and that those who carried out sexual violence were more likely to have seen X-rated violent sexual media. Well, weeks after massive storms brought devastation to large parts of southern Mexico, thousands of victims are still stunned by their loss. CBN and Operation Blessing are on the scene helping people recover. Gary Lane has that story.
Beyond the city of Acapulco, with its luxurious hotels and beautiful beaches, lie many communities untouched by millions of tourist dollars. These poverty-stricken areas were devastated last month when Mexico was punished by 2 powerful storms. Over 100 dead, thousands of wounded, and 1 million people affected, many losing their homes and livelihoods.
No quedó nada.
But some are receiving welcome relief thanks to Operation Blessing and CBN Mexico. Residents urgently needed safe drinking water, so the team installed water purification plants, helping thousands to avoid sickness from contaminated water. In other communities, they set up portable kitchens, allowing flood victims to cook safely without having to cut trees for firewood.
I don't have to look for wood. I don't have to cut the trees. It's no pollution. Okay, no pollution. There's nothing. The kitchen is worked very well.
Operation Blessing Scott Hill traveled to many desperate communities.
There was no water anywhere. They couldn't drink water. They couldn't use water to wash anything. Operation Blessing put a water purification unit in, and obviously the families were just incredibly grateful. And one man especially, who lived about 30, 45 minutes away and had come walking because his family didn't have clean drinking water.
And CBN's Mexico director says his team also brings storm victims a message of hope.
We arrived to the house of Aurelio. He was an elderly man. He lost everything he got, and he was wondering how he was going to survive because he lost his small store. Operation Blessing and CBN arrived and brought a mobile kitchen, and then he was able to eat every day, and he was also able to share all the food with his neighbors and families. And he asked us at the end of the visit to pray for him, and he was thankful to God because he provided for his meal and his survival.
For disaster victims like these, simply knowing there are people willing to come and help makes a difference. CBN and Operation Blessing will stay in the area to continue to help Mexico's storm victims during their long recovery. Gary Lane, CBN News.
You know, Pat, it can't be said enough. Operation Blessing is often the first to arrive on the scene and often the last to leave.
Exactly right. It happens over and over again. I was just talking to Bill Horan on the phone. Actually, he's in Japan right now. And when those tsunamis hit in northern Japan, we were first up. And he helped these fishermen get boats, motors, nets, lines, all the things they needed. And they got back into business, and they are grateful to him. They had a big ceremony up there in Japan to honor Operation Blessing for what they've done, because the Japanese realized how important that was. But we went to the one thing they needed more than anything else was to get back on their feet economically.
The Ohio school district forced to take down a portrait of Jesus will also have to pay thousands in legal fees. The Jackson City School District agreed to a settlement with the American Civil Liberties Union and the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Now they're required to pay $95,000 in legal fees and damages. Superintendent Phil Howard said in a statement that this district's attorneys believe settling was the best case scenario at this point because the legal fees were mounting by the day. California has changed the legal definition of a family so that children can now have more than 2 legal parents. Governor Jerry Brown signed the legislation last week. The Los Angeles Times reports that the law is aimed at addressing the shifting family structure, including situations where children will be with same-sex couples with an opposite-sex biological parent. Conservative groups fought the law as an attack on the traditional family. And you can always get the latest from our CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.